Mm.
So officially welcome. Welcome to Harmonic Leadership. Uh, we'll get cracking straight away now. The the course being 4 months long is quite intense. Um, the next 3 days, I've deliberately designed to give you space in between a lot of content and a lot of reflective work too. So sometimes you'll be learning, sometimes you'll be pontificating and contemplating. Other times you'll be doing some full-on work. The whole point of this course, though, is having the objective to help you unearth, this deepest level of yourself to be that confident, capable, and credible harmonic leader. I developed Confident, Capable, and Credible as a milestone for my combat team as I was being put in charge of them to raise them. We did 10 months worth of training before we deployed to Iraq for 7.5 months, and then coming home. And I realized when I really stripped everything away and knew and really analyzed what we were doing in its essence. This is where we needed to get to, being confident, capable, and credible. And we're going to explore these three words later on today. So, and we'll do that so that you get an understanding of what it is. I mean, being confident, that's your gig. I can help you with that by having a look at the blockages that you've got, particularly on the emotional side and belief cycle that we can help you with by I don't believe in knocking him in the head. I don't believe in neutralizing anymore. I'm very much turned to the alchemist sense, and I'll explain that in more detail. But always, I've realized everything happens for a reason in our life, and if there's a block there, it's simply an unrealized issue that is sitting there ready to be. It's not just healed, but it's learned from. Because part of the healing process, and I'll talk to you in a lot more detail about this as the program goes on. Part of the unrecognized or unacknowledged part of the healing process is the lesson. And it is the germination of the lesson through the actual process of not putting yourself back together like you were. You can't be. You can never be like that. And later on today, I'll explain some of the science behind that. But it's about understanding that all these things, and it does not matter what they've been. They could be a psychiatric, psychological disorder that you've been labeled with. It could be, a situation in life which has happened. It could be a physical ailment. It could be a broken bone, etc. Remembering that bones hold our deepest spiritual beliefs when broken. So there's all this happening for us in life, and the process of healing allows us to go through and develop these lessons. And when we do that and we start getting the talent to do that, that's when inner confidence really comes. And confidence, a lot of people, will want the external validation, the external recognition, and that allows their confidence to be brewed. But the issue with that is what happens when it's not coming and confidence goes down. When I'm working with people that are starting a small business or project, one of the key points is have a look at your key performance indicators in the first 12 months. Because if they're external to you, good luck. That's why the statistics are so, and I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard 90%, 85%, 70% of lots of different percentages of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. And I don't actually have a solid statistic that I can put my hand on my heart and say what it is. I just don't know. It's actually quite high. But in my own journey, the last 15 years after getting out, like what I've found is I had four business names that I let die. And because it needed to die because the first one focused on transition out of the military. And then I realized it's not really where I wanted to go. And then I fell into post-traumatic stress. Why? Because I was wounded and I was trying to get myself out of there. And so I started work with that. And then that morphed, but I didn't lose the first part. What happened was is this death allowing for a morphing to occur. So the baby wasn't thrown out with the bathwater. It just allowed it to actually evolve in this process. And it's that is the evolutionary process as we talk about. Capable, that's a skill-based thing, in which I can help you with and will help you with over the course of the program. going into all these different areas that I'll explain in a little bit more detail for this session particularly. Now, credibility is a really fascinating thing. Credibility is both internal and external. Because when you stand up, if you don't feel credible, linked to confident, then that will come across to your audience in some way, shape, or form. The trick here is also to understand that the audience might perceive you as far more credible than you give yourself credit for, which is hilarious. How many times? I mean, I bet that's happened to you as well. But getting out of the military, like I had to stand in front of people and say, if you want my services, I'm this much money. And it was like, I'd never done that, like ever, because I was in the military at 18 and like they gave me every 2 weeks, it was a pay packet. And having to stand there and go, this is me, and I'm worth this much is like, and then Kirsty did this really cool thing. She said, why don't you sit down and just write out all the leadership experience you've ever had? And I sat down and I came out and I actually had tears in my eyes. And I said, now I understand why 4 generals accosted my mother in the Armored Corps mess, asking her why, demanding actually, not just asking, why is James getting out? And I realized I had more operational experience than anyone else of my peers at the point where I was just about to be promoted. And not only that, just who I was compared to a lot of other people. So I could see what they had believed I needed to go on in that system and become. However, that wasn't me. And funnily enough, my mother answered that question by saying he's finally making a decision for himself and his family. And I thought, well, that's actually quite an astute observation by my mother, who hadn't really known what was going on for me, but she made that quite astute call. So credibility is a fascinating thing. It's both internal and external. And we'll explore that a bit later today. So that's the objective of the course. But for this particular next 3 days, what we're going to do is our key fundamental thing that we're building towards is the construct of what's called a leadership philosophy. Now, I'm a massive fan of the etymology or the genesis of words, where the energy of the words come from. Our First Nation people, the ones that are deeply connected, know phonetics actually come from the land. It's why if you look at the indigenous tongue of this land, in most places, it's really, really harsh. Well, look at the land. It's very harsh. Now, around here, this place is called Bundjalung territory, but it's not by those that are connected, because it isn't Bundjalung Nation. It's a white man's label. Came in around, I believe, the 30s is when I've been able to track it back to. There was a family dispute in the local indigenous here. But that said, the local tongue is not meant to have A's in its phonetic language. And it's really quite fascinating if you think about it, because the Arakal people, and that you can hear Arakal, it's a very hard term. That's the people that are claiming custodianship of Byron Bay, and it doesn't make any sense. Matter of fact, they weren't even people back then. Like clans did not give themselves names. The names were given to them by other people referring to them. So it's language is a really fascinating thing. It holds so much. It can divide really, really easily. If you look at the word gospel, it actually comes from the term God's spell or the word of God. And if you look at God's spell, it's a really pivotal statement, because the gospels can be used to engender life, and they can be used to demonically destroy life. Depends on the intention of the person utilizing the word. Matter of fact, if you go even further to the book of John, or the Gospel of John, I mean the Catonic Gospel, that's in the New Testament, as opposed to the secret book of John, which is now known about from the Nag Hammadi text, the Gnostic text, found in 1945. But the Gospel of John says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, if you break that down, the word, the phonetic, the sound is really, really important. So when I talk language, and particularly philosophy, we'll go into the etymology of both leadership and philosophy a bit later on. But particularly philosophy, if you have a look at it, it's broken down into 2 parts, philo and sophia. Philo means the love of, and sophia is wisdom. So philosophy actually means the love of wisdom. It's really quite beautiful if you think about it. Although if you go and get a PhD nowadays, guarantee it'll be very left brain orientated, whereas philosophy is very like Sophia is a feminine construct, right brain construct, which I find quite fascinating. But the what a philosophy does is gives you an underpinning of a way of being. And these 3 days, like we're going to really dive deep into having a look at like who you perceive yourself as opposed to who you are, and then who having a look at what you are, the person you are actually birthing. And could that actually be what life's meant to be, like a whole complete birthing process right until the point of death? I don't know, a bit of something to contemplate. But we'll have a look at this whole thing from many different angles over the next 3 days to come to a place where you've got something where you can really like you've birthed it. It's come through you with a deep connection and understanding of this is me as a leader, and this is how I am to lead. So that by the end of these 3 days on Saturday, that's where we want you to have become. One of the reasons why I actually got off really quickly in my own personal development was the way I was trained was by a guy he he was world standard, Tony Robbins-esque actually, of being up front, working in crowds of 300 people in the Sydney Entertainment Centre and stuff like that. So he taught me how to read a room as they enter the door. 300, more people enter the door, and he was like really fascinating. And I worked with him for about 4 years. But the first thing he got me to do was in this workshop, 3 day personal development workshop from 9 till 5. Sit there and take notes by time, by slide, and everything. And I did that for 3 consecutive workshops. And then what I did is I wrote it all out on a computer, and then I synthesized it, and I basically gave him his like the script and everything of his workshop. And that meant that like I knew by time, by slide, everything about that workshop. But the other thing was every time I was writing it down, like the epiphanies, because I'd already been to the workshop. That workshop was the thing that changed my life. It's when I really put my hand up. 18 months after going to the first one of those, I was standing up the front presenting it. And that ability to retain the knowledge came because I spent the time, invested the time in myself to actually really be with the information and the knowledge. But then as like I get from both of you actually, just because of getting to know you a little bit, it's like the door opens and then you've got this thirst to go down the door to the tangents, and like the tangents is where I believe so much richness is involved. That's why I often refer to myself as the king of tangents. But and often it will be in a tangent where you'll get a larger breakthrough than the objective of the session. So and for me, what I've learned in as a facilitator particularly is to let go to have the form, the structure that allows to guide the flow, but at the same time, just listen to that inner sense and go with, okay, I've got a really deep feeling to share this or to go down this path. And the more and more I've done that, the more and more confident I've become in absolute way out situations. And that's not just in facilitating, it's in my life. Like this is transposed to my everyday life. And that's one of the key things that I really feel and I get from both of your objectives is this is not just about you and leadership. This is about you and life. And I really that warms my heart. Now, speaking of heart, because you mentioned, Lisa, you want to develop the leadership skills from that feeling sense. And I completely love that. But one of the things that the New Age movement has done is slaughtered the mind it's elevated the heart at the expense of the mind. You don't elevate one or the other at the expense of the other. It's actually a unison of heart mind. And leadership is one of the best like spheres to see this in operation. Leadership is not a left brain function. It's not a right brain function. I'll talk about this in a minute in more detail, but it's actually a whole brain function. It draws of both the left and the right hemisphere. It draws of both the mind and I feel it actually draws of the mind, the heart, and the soul. And when you unify those three things in leadership, it's like your presence, everything about you literally changes. And it can do so overnight because of the dramatic power that you actually tap into. And so, yeah, I really look forward to helping you unearth a lot of this stuff across the program and spend that time to. I love how both of you know you've talked about purifying, and I'll talk in more detail about purifying self later. But yeah, I really love what the ancient Christian mystics said: sanctify before you illuminate, because otherwise it's like you go and see a psychic and you've got to be aware that they're transposing an intuitive message through their own life conditioning and stuff. And the best psychics are the ones that are the cleanest in their transmission. Because that's, lots of people say, oh, they're charlatans. Well, and there is charlatans out there. I completely can get that. But there's also amazing people that have an ability and an adeptness into the communicative realm that it's really life changing for so many people when it's used effectively. So and that comes, I believe, from a mind heart soul connection, and we'll spend a lot of time in that.
So,
Awesome.
sorry, James, can I just ask a quick question? I
No.
get told a lot to stop thinking, don't think about it, get out of your head.
Mm.
And
That's because you're an obsessive overthinker.
yeah, okay. So, all right.
However, this is what don't discard that. It,
Yeah.
it's a refinement. That's a skill.
Mm,
You look at any major entrepreneur, and they will all have been diagnosed back in the day with ADHD or ADD or something else like that, in
mm,
which is everyone's going, oh, the the ones that go ballistic are the ones that go, this is a gift. But
mm.
how am I seeing as an obstacle, as an impingement, as a wound, as a negative right now? That energy that I'm holding it in its negative space is not allowing it to fully blossom. It's a skill. I reckon if ADHD and stuff, by the way, the French psychiatrist who actually developed ADHD on his retirement day said there is no such thing. And if you look at the French don't have a diagnostics and statistics manual version 5, which is an American from the psychiatric fraternity in America, Psychiatric Association of America, actually. They have a different manual and the for diagnosis of adverse mental conditions. And rates in Europe are very distinctly different to rates in America. And that's not just because of that book and the way of labeling. It's got a multitude of different things. And I think you're going to see a massive change in America very, very over the next decade if changes can hold in the space of the next few months. But to come back to this point, it's like both of you actually will have things in you that have said to like you've got in trouble from them before. They've sent you off the rails, etc. It's about understanding the purity of the energy, the essence of the energy, and then allowing it to actually take its natural form. And I'll go into this a lot of detail, and you've probably heard me say it before. There is no such thing as evil, and I now categorically know that. I understand that. And the reason why I say it is because evil is simply energy in which is in its wrong place, and therefore has malintent, and therefore comes out as what we would label as evil. The label only helps to draw attention. Then the label should be dropped because as soon as you've got like your attention is drawn to that space, any adversarial intention on your behalf will actually exacerbate the evil itself, as opposed to being able to do anything for it. And again, I'll take you through that in a lot of detail. So it's about understanding these people. Lots of people project on you as well, and we'll talk about that next session. But it's about understanding these superhero talents can be your Achilles heel at the same time. And that then comes down to a form of choice and discipline to be able to refine that, purify it, so it actually enables you actually to benefit from it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Great question. Anything else? Either? Nope. Awesome. So what I'll be doing quite regularly, stuff in essence, starting tomorrow, is we'll often start a session by just checking in. And the reason why we'll check in is there's multiple reasons. However, if you want to become emotionally literate, and I'll explain that terminology later in this session, you've got to understand what your emotions are. In other words, you've got to spend time in them. Now, it's a big fallacy that people say women are more emotional. No, women are more in the flow of energy at times, and so therefore the emotions run through them. That does not necessarily mean that they're emotionally literate. They'll be often acting in emotion as opposed from it, which is a crux of emotional literacy. So the key point to this is, how do we develop that? We spend time reflecting where we're at. Now, this is also a really good activity. All these activities I give you, you can use whenever, however, with whomever you want. Okay, so this type of activity is a great one to start, like a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting when you've got a team, etc. And you don't have to have these specific titles on them, but you will notice that each one of them is specifically to do with leadership. So just quickly going around, the way we do this, I call this the wagon wheel. You guys hear the birds? Oh, that's good. So Zoom's done a lot of good things about cutting out background sound now. So a bit like your dog, like I've got an incredible amount of birds at the moment hanging around. So what happens is you'll notice that there's 8 spokes on the wheel itself. Communication, like I'm talking about your ability to be heard and feel like you hear, not just that you can speak. Relationship, not that you're just in one, but how's it actually going? Empathy, like walking 1,000 miles in another person's shoes. Are you actually empathetic, or I'll talk to you and I'll teach you the difference between empathy and sympathy too, which is a big one. But can you allow yourself to put yourself in other people's shoes, or do you struggle doing that? Decision making, I don't mean that you make decisions, but how is the process for you? Or you might actually be making the decision not to make decisions. So, yeah, we'll just have to have a look at that as well. Affluence. Affluence is, I'll take you through this in detail towards module 4, because as leaders, we've got to understand we'll be dealing with the energy of creation, and money in our 2025 human construct is it's a big ticket item in as far as creating things. It's not what affluence truly is. Affluence truly is the ability to touch the divine and touch source to actually vector the energy of creation in the way you actually want it. So, and I'll take you through some techniques and procedures. That's so military-esque, James. You can delete that from your lexicon if you want anytime soon. I'll take you through um, some techniques and some understanding about how to actually do that in quite some detail. Direction setting, it's about like being able to understand where you're going and make that choice. Emotions, not just you've got them, but you actually understand them, how they're going. Flexibility, are you flexible or are you rigid? Now, the way you do this is in the middle, that's like around here is 1. Out the apex is 10. And so 10 is you're humming, it's singing, and it's awesome. 1 is it ain't too good at all. And so what you'll do is you go around, you put a dot on the actual line wherever it is. Okay. And once you've done that, once you've completed each one of them, then go around and join the dots, because I'm a big fan of dot to dot. And we'll just, once you've done that, just let me know and we'll have a look at what you got. We've got actually a lot of what we'll talk about over time is what I call getting to the cause. There's a law in Hermeticism that in that video I talked about, law 6 by if off my memory, which is the law of cause and effect. Everything has a cause, and every cause has an effect. And when you start to understand the cause, which comes through pattern analysis, which is actually a left brain thing, but also dancing with the right brain intuitive sense too, because quite often a pattern can be counterintuitive. Then what starts to happen is you become more effective in the way you're actually engaging the world. But if you look at how disconnected and distracted we are at the moment, you just look what's happening off the east coast of Australia. Now, you cannot tell me without a shadow of doubt, as an ex-military officer, that that's not. There's a lot of stuff that's happening we're not being told about, and it's a massive distraction of fear being put out in the off the shores of Australia. And I won't go into it because it bores the shit out of me. And that's the thing. What I've realized, and you'll get to know this in the run of the course. So I might as well tell you right now. I'm a very irreverently reverend person. So um, it's not that I don't give a fuck. I give the right fuck.
Mm,
And the rest of them can just go about their merry way because they're not about me. And that's I don't mind. It's about someone else. And good on them. But I don't have to give it energy.
mm,
And a lot of people who are melodramatically inclined, as we talked about with that polarization sessions, then what they actually do in that they waste so much energy. So it's about giving the right folk. But we've been conditioned, like conditioned so intensely about things. If you look at it, we just have to take a pill and then we can soldier on. And this one, both these were billboards that I took photos of up in Coolangatta. Now the one on Panadol like gets even better than the one on Codral. Um, no time for a headache. In other words, you've got no time to listen to your body anymore. So you take a pill which doesn't get rid of the actual cause, but it masks the symptom so that you can keep charging on doing the thing which is actually overloading you and your body until you crash. And we're saying that's a good thing. So
mm,
the one that really got me though, this was entering the Chindra service center to pay for some fuel, and it says the essentials, and you see Nurofen, Panadol, then you've got chocolate and lollies, and awesome. Over here you have a bit of mineral water, and I think we have a poncho, an emergency poncho there too. So obviously they're essentials, but that's just like some person in BP that they weren't told to put that there. They decided that would be a great idea to set that up and put the essentials. And it's like it's not just accepted, but it's beautiful. Like, yeah, they're the essentials. Have some chocolate. Just distract yourself. Don't worry about life. And the thing is, there's half truth to that. Go back to what I said about giving the right fuck. There's a heart, and therein lies a harmonic leader is so in tune with truth because they seek it, but they realize with every truth lies a half truth, and with every half truth lies a truth. And so, because they understand that type of mechanism, they're not just listening to what's being said, they're seeing through the words to the intention put behind it, what's not being said, what's also being behaved upon when is being said. Now, because society is distracting ourselves so much, and both of you, got such a desire to help humanity better itself. The other thing is to realize that there's a lot of humanity that doesn't want to better themselves.
mm,
And if I focus on that, then all of a sudden, watch where everything about my capability and capacity goes through the floor. We are dealing with this type of stuff on a daily basis, but does it really piss us off? Well, if it pisses us off, then I've been triggered. Go back to what you said about sanctify, Logan. So we've got to be aware of it, but at the same time, we've got to pay it the credence that it deserves. This is a really funny one about men and masculinity, though, because obviously you need to be taller than your woman because that's a sign of I'm not too sure what. But yeah, so you get things in your shoes that was from a magazine that I looked at. I thought that was very, very funny. And it goes back to this point about confident, capable, and credible. Obviously, that person or the marketers are targeting that person that requires that external form of validation, etc. Now, my daughter's boyfriend has just purchased or swapped out actually a fairly high range ute that was pretty much supercharged and runs on a specific fuel you can only get at Miami Beach, which is very close to aviation fuel. Because it's not meant to be on the street, it's meant to be elsewhere. He swapped it out for a BMW Sports. And I took this BMW Sports for a drive the other day, but he got it off a person out at Logan, and he was quite hilarious in telling me, in all probability, there's a lot of drugs being dealt with out there. So where did the car come from? So when I was driving it, what I did is allow myself to go into the feeling of a young kid getting a lot of money, not necessarily for the right reasons. And it's so easy to tune into the praise and the attention and therefore the energy that they're actually getting. When we understand the flow of energy as leaders, we'll see people's behavior in such a different perspective, which then means we don't have to deal with symptoms. We deal with what's actually going on for the person if the person chooses. And not only that, when we unify our team will be educated and the culture will be set to the point where we don't play in symptoms because they bore us. We actually deal with the deep-seated stuff, and that gets us excited. It's not that we're boring people because we don't follow sport all the time. It's that we actually deal with the real essence of it. And as being a person who I've mentored a number of AFL captains and NRL players, etc. Actually, I developed and ran the first NRL transition workshop. So I've worked in that environment a lot. Um, Nowadays, the administration bores me, but the person that's excelling to bring themselves to a whole new level, that excites me. So very, very big difference. One of the reasons why we do it though is we come to this word called denial. And if you actually look at it, it can be said that we don't even notice I am lying. Now, if you go down the highway and you look at the utes which are driving at the moment, to me, they look like big groper fish. Like they've got big dumb mouths that are like, "Roar, roar, roar." If you look at it, that's what to me that's the first thing that I think of. And they're getting bigger and they're getting gnarlier. Matter of fact, I think something's called the Avenger now, like Toyota Prado is called the Toyota Prado Avenger or something like that. There's a lot of intensity, there's a lot of anger in them. And look at road rage now compared to what was. The car is like people saying, I need the car. You don't need that bigger car. Like, and I had a ute for a long time. I know the size of utes and what you can do. I can pack Tetris in the back of a ute. Um, but at the same time, I have no intention of buying a massive car because if it doesn't have a capability point of view. And in buying my last ute, it was really funny. I walked into the sales yard and I said, "This is what I want and this is what I have." And I told him exactly how much money I had. And I said, the only flex, because it was given to our charity, I said, the only flexibility I've got is the trade into that car also given to us. So if you can milk that one for more, then that's what they've got. So that's, everything that I want, all the capabilities that I want, and the amount of money. Now I went to two separate dealerships at the same time, the Holden dealership and the Mazda dealership. This guy was an older, wiser guy in his 40s, and this guy was a young guy, a young buck trying to prove himself in his 20s. This guy was hilarious what he was trying to sell me. In the end, this guy just fell into the sale because he says, I can't give you a used car, but I can give you a new car with all that stuff. Are you interested? It just can't be manual. It's got to be automatic because I don't have a manual. And I've gone, well, it gives me everything. And there's the price. Totally. Whereas this guy's trying to sell me a massive Toyota, no, it wasn't a Mazda BT50 with all the bells and whistles and stuff. I'm not interested, champ. Like, what part of this are we not communicating right now? And what I realized is he just didn't want to communicate on my language. And that's okay. He's just in that zone where he feels he needs that to actually be the person that he is. Go back to the drug dealer driving around in the BMW Sports. So the disconnection is it's rife, but I'm going to suggest that it's like it's so much deeper than we even give it credit for and understanding. And part of the harmonic leadership role is to actually see where disconnections happen and realize where we can affect it and where there's no need to affect it because it has no effect. And that's a really key thing. But I did mention before left and right hemispheres. Well, the first one is the intelligent quotient. which is obviously where lots of research was done, especially early to mid last century. And then there's the emotional quotient, and this started to come in towards the 80s, etc. Melver and Selver and Mayer and Selvery were the two guys that developed the actual term EQ. Then Daniel Goldman, he released a book called Emotional Intelligence, etc. You'll very rarely hear me use emotional intelligence as a term because intelligence, where does it live? Heart or the head?
Good.
Head, exactly right. Now, you can't think yourself through an emotion.
Mm.
It's a really critical thing to understand. And a lot of you will have done a lot of work. The work we'll do will be different because thinking accidentally gets to the bottom of it. Feeling takes you straight there. And that's why I have so many people who have done so many different courses, development, everything like this. They come to me and it's very evident to see they're still in the wound because they've only addressed the wound from a cognitive place. And I'll teach you as to the mechanics of that, and also then the techniques to purify yourself in the way in which allows for the wound to truly morph into the lesson to become the foundation stone for you to leap forward from. A bit more detail in this though is the spiritual quotient is it's the whole brain function. It's where we're going. It is a deep sense of what leadership is. So breaking them down like logic, pattern recognition, reason, solidarity, like it's an individual thing is the left brain. Interestingly enough, it's the last hemisphere. So prefrontal cortex is the last hemisphere, but out of the left and right, the right developed first in our brain evolution, from our hind brain, our reptilian brain, into our limbic region, which is our midbrain and our emotional center. Then came the right hemisphere, and then came the left hemisphere. And so what's generally happen though is because we were developed quite early in a fear-based construct, the neural connections between the limbic region don't go forward as much as they go back to the hindbrain. And when the brain is wired backwards, literally wired backwards, one will be in fear. When more neural connections go forward, that's when you start being far more in your super conscious conscious states, in your higher conscious, and you start to have that collective sense, and your brain patterns start to reflect that more deeply. You don't go into adverse mental condition, particularly depression, because things are wired in a way in which is naturally more attuned to others, which therefore is not as isolative. Remember, all adverse mental conditions are isolative by nature, and I mean they bring a person into isolation, which is often why people try and think their way through stuff, which is where it's not where the wound is. On the right hemisphere, now remember, I'm using right and left colloquially. It's not actually the case, but it's a generalization which actually serves a purpose. So again, just be aware that I'm using a generalization when I'm using left brain, right brain. Left brain is more masculine, male. Right brain is more feminine, female. The corpus callosum, which sits between the two, is literally, it has more neural connections in there than there are phones, including mobile phones on the face of the planet. It's the center where neuroscience will say is the center of genius. It comes alive in the mind of a massive creative, but it's the gateway between the left and the right hemisphere. And in utero for men, because of the presence of testosterone, it hardens more than a woman, which is why the initial receptivity of a lot of information coming to the left hemisphere can flow more easily to the right hemisphere for a woman as opposed for a man. It's just, but the thing is, it's like the gate hinge. Um, it's been put for a man, it's on the left-hand side, so it's harder to go through to the left to the right-hand side. For a woman, quite regularly, it's on the right-hand side, so it's harder to go through to the left-hand side. But what you can actually do is rehinge your gate so it flinges like that. And there are many different brain activities. If you're interested, I'll take you through one later, but that can actually allow for that development. Emotions are but part of it. Heart states go deeper into it, creativity and empathy and relationship. There's so much more to that that we may have time to get deeper into. But the point is, these are the things which they're really life affirming, come across in the right hemisphere. And if you go into a mythological thing, the feminine being the bearer of life, then that makes a lot of sense. When you come to the spiritual quotient, which is by the 80s, a number of people were starting to touch on it, 90s, more people, entering into the 2000s, but predominantly only in the last 10 years, this has started to be talked about by more and more people. There's a guy in the psychological fraternity, he's one of the founders of cognitive behavior therapy, guy called Brain Fart James. Um, James, what was his name? Oh, well, he'll come if I want him to come. He he's quite a fascinating guy. I went to a conference over in America, and a psychiatrist was sitting next to me, and she said, "Oh, do you know Marty, Martin Seligman?" Um, and I said, "Oh, no, I don't." She says, "Oh, yeah, I'm friends with him." And I said, "Oh, what's he like?" Because I was reading one of his books, and she says, "Well, just imagine going into his living room, and above the mantelpiece is the biggest self-portrait you've ever seen in your life." I've gone, "Oh, okay." And so he said, "That sums him up." I've gone, "Okay." But he's done a lot of interesting work, and some of his stuff have actually I could have just looked at my bookshelf too, and I would have found his name. Um, but some of the stuff he's done in the last 5 to 10 years has changed very much to looking at meaning, because that's very much what the spiritual quotient is about: connection, meaning, purpose, and union. So even in the cognitive sciences, people are realizing that there's something deeper to the way the human being operates. Like the behaviorists, very, very funny people, behaviorists, but I've got a number of friends that have specifically focused down that line. Having chats to them is a very funny thing to do. But even they're looking at meaning and purpose and that type of stuff. If you haven't read it already, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most epic books I've ever read. Predominantly, not because, just because it's an amazing book, but it was the time of my life when I read it, and I was really in a dark hole, and that actually assisted me break out of that dark hole and find. It was a beautiful thing that he says in it: suffering ceases to be suffering when meaning is found. And in my darkest days, and like that really held true for me. So harmonic leadership very much sits in the spiritual quotient. We acknowledge the left hemisphere, we acknowledge the right hemisphere, but we look at what is necessary as a whole brain thing. In a leadership function, management is very much left hemisphere orientated, procedures, techniques, management thereof. Leadership has a lot more to do with the right brain, but also it's a whole brain thing, because you do need both your left and your right hemisphere on point to truly really rock and roll. So following from that, like when we're looking at that emotional connection, I mentioned that I don't really use the term emotional intelligence. If I do, I'm using it for a different reason. But the two terms I use was one, emotional literacy, and what this is it is you understand the language of emotions. There was a young 34-year-old, German by birth, but he'd been in Australia since the age of 4, bloke sitting at my fire about, don't know, 8 years ago. And he was crying, and he said, "James, mate, like, I've got a loving wife, I've got two amazing kids." Tears are streaming down his face. And he says, I just can't communicate with them. And I said, "So what I'm hearing, brother, is that you love your wife and she loves you, and you love your kids and they love you. And so you got relationships there, but you just feel they're hollow because you can't communicate what you really, really want to communicate with them." He says, "Yeah, exactly." And I said, "Mate, you got no issue with communication. Think about it." He was able to tell me exactly what's going on for him. So how can he have an issue with communication? He can't. The issue is he doesn't speak emotion. So he's like an English person over in Spain trying to talk to a Spaniard who doesn't speak English. And it's like, you only get part of the message coming across, if that at all. And sometimes you just walk away because you can't communicate. And it can get really, really frustrated, but it also can get really, really nervous. Like when you've been in a foreign nation that speaks hardly any English and you're on a train station and you look up at that board where telling where all the trains go and there's nothing in English. I don't know if you've been there before, but it's like, you know. But by the way, just a side tangent to that story, every time I've been in that situation, someone has come up. An angel has been delivered in that moment in time. And one took me through Seoul, Korea, South Korea, the capital Seoul, took me right through the train station, put me on the right train, and took me to my destination. And she was an amazing uni student. It was really, really cool that she did that for me. It was a perfect angel. I was 21, first time I'd been overseas, and it was like, and she obviously read that like really, really well. So the point is that when you can't speak emotion, then you don't understand not only how to communicate to people, but you can't communicate to yourself because the emotions are really key to our understanding about how we actually interact with the world. Where they live in our body, and it's now we're starting to realize that the ancient Chinese and the Vedas before them were very, very wise, and for many hundreds of years we discounted what they knew for thousands of years, and now we're realizing, hold on a minute, they're pretty much on the money. So we realize that in the can we call it modern science? I don't know, but how they work and what they mean and what their message is. When I understand this, then I'm starting to become really emotionally literate. And like for me, we'll talk about emotions a lot in I think it's week 3 or 4, um, week 4 emotional literacy, and it will go deep into it, but not just like for ourselves, but we'll also be looking at how they operate in other people and how we can actually utilize that to support them to get more out of them or to help them get more out of themselves, etc., etc. So we'll go deep into that. But the next key term is very, very rarely used. There's a cool book on it by a guy called Robert Augustus Masters. Robert Augustus Masters. Sure. Somewhere in one of my bookshelves. It's called Emotional Intimacy, and it's actually it's actually quite a good book on emotions. He's written quite a lot of stuff, especially in the men's space too, Logan. If you haven't heard of him before, he's quite cool. He came to Australia the other day. So someone was trying to get me to do his course. I said, "Yeah, thanks, no thanks." But yeah, like for basic level stuff, it's really quite cool. Uh, for me to tell you what emotional intimacy is, it's feeling what I want to feel when I want to feel it to the extent or duration that I need to feel it to understand its message so that I can put myself in a conscious relationship about how I now express myself in my being through my doing into the world. And when I do that, it means I'm on point. It means like I'm now dancing with the universe. And it's not that I always need to be happy. It's not that I won't ever get grumpy. But if grumpiness comes into my space, it comes in walking with a level of happiness instead of wanton destruction that quite often happens when anger walks in the room inappropriately. And fear, exactly the same thing. Fear is not a red light; it's an amber light, and it's actually assisting you put all your senses on heightened state of alert because you require them. So you require to be very conscious in your movement from that moment on. Shame's a red light. Shame is a dead red light. Stop, 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 cheese. By the way, Lisa, my nickname is Cheese. So if I ever refer to myself as Cheese, I'm referring to my inner child. And Logan, as I mentioned on the last webinar, was the person who helped me find this. When he called me out I was hiding behind my nickname. So if I ever throw Cheese in there, I'm referring back to an inner child wound story that I'm talking about. But it's like, and often shame will be directly linked to an inner child wound that you'd have. And so it's like, stop, dude, like you're going off path now. And then you'll turn around and you'll feel guilty because you'll see the collateral damage you've done because you jumped off path. And it's great that you feel guilty for 30 seconds because then it'll go, right, what do I need to do to actually get myself back on path and clean up this mess? Cool, do that. I don't feel guilt and shame anymore. So your relationship to them will be distinctly different. And in the last few years, it's like when I feel shame, I know exactly what to do and I smile. instead of becoming paralyzed, which is like my life was run by shame for a long, long, long time. That post-traumatic stress disorder, for crying out loud. So this is where we're heading. You won't get there completely in 4 months. I was going to say 4 years. That would have been a Freudian slip, wouldn't it? But the thing is, you will get the tools, techniques, and understandings and framework to actually continue this, because this is for me, I'll just speak for myself here, but it's a longer journey than just a year. It's a life journey for me, to refine and constantly refine. And I work on myself every single day, as a level of refinement. Awesome. Any questions so far?
I've just had a comment. That photo you had with the shoe insert and the
Yeah.
man boot up, it's gotten worse to that. They're literally cutting their shin bones and then getting an extension put in and taking 3 to 6 months to learn to walk again. And it's all that childhood stuff. That's where we store it, in our shin bones. And here are these men with so much shame. They'll go and cut bone and extend it, and it was just like, wow. There's more than a shoe insert, but
That is crazy. Like you mentioned doing anything to your shins and it sends shivers through my body. Oh my goodness. Wow, brother. Yeah. I don't know if I should be thanking you for that bit of information, by the way.
uh, yeah. Well, when you said shame is the inner child wound, like I
Yeah.
recognize muscles and lower leg is kind of quite often where it is, and it's
Fascinating.
stop, red light.
Red light. Well, here's some indicators, and you can use these indicators for yourself and other people as well. If people have got emotional literacy issues, they get emotionally triggered. We're in a society at the moment which allows you to blame everyone else for you being emotionally triggered. That doesn't actually make any sense when you understand that the emotion comes up in you as opposed to anyone else. But what's happened is, and the reason why we've been allowed to do that is because we are an emotionally illiterate society on the whole at the moment. That can change. How do I change it? I start with myself. And then once I develop emotional literacy and intimacy in myself, that means I actually will develop very good and healthy emotional boundaries. And so therefore I won't accept someone projecting onto me. Then I need courage. I need courage to stand around and say, I'm hearing you right now. However, I'm not going to take on what you're telling me to take on. That is you. And that's not to do with me. One of the reasons why I recovered from post-traumatic stress so quickly was Kirsty said, the anger in which you are exhibiting right now is not mine. You need to deal with that. And that was a really beautiful gift, a beautiful gift. But with this personal responsibility comes into it massively. Like, it's one of the key aspects of harmonic leadership is that we can lead ourselves from a very personal, responsible place. I'll talk about that in a minute. Intolerance and impatience, including boredom, actually. Boredom is simply because you're not willing to allow yourself to go into the emotion which is sitting right there. And so you'll distract yourself, you'll numb yourself through boredom, and then flick on to the next thing, which is utilizing distraction as a behavior. So, but the intolerance and impatience in a lot of people, it's really quite fascinating now. People being risk adverse. I know that at least one person in this conversation will be smiling when I put up risk adverse, because of your personality type. But we have become a risk adverse society, and at the moment, like, people that have the ability to help won't, because they fear that they'll have backlash comes against them, and that causes impotence and powerlessness. The must be right is a really, really fascinating thing. If you look at must be right, it's simply because I can't be wrong. And I'll talk to you about judgment in a lot of detail in one of the sessions. Always picking up the slack of people, and therein is what do you mean, James? That's a really helpful person. No, it's a masochist. It's a person who's taking a lot of burden on their shoulder, and they'll end up becoming a coulda, woulda, shoulda, and very, very exhausted. And in the end, what they will do is, people in all possibility will love them, but they will have set everyone up to need them. And so always picking up the slack comes from a need to be needed. Don't trust and must control. We're going deep detail into this one a bit later on. And perfectionist and the procrastinator. Well, what's the difference between the perfectionist and the master? It's the full stop. Master knows exactly where to put the full stop. Perfectionist cannot put a full stop in there. And then the last one is we will distract themselves or ourselves, and we won't be able to sit still, have to go on to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. What these all indicate is varying levels of inability to sit in an emotion to allow it to move properly, because the person has got a whole suite of ghetto blasters which are currently blasting around them, and that's their emotional turbulence. And when you turn these ghetto blasters down or turn them off, then all of a sudden, like, there's this peace. Now, sometimes people can't be in that peace. Like, they literally have to get themselves out of that because they've so entrained themselves to be in chaos. And it's not the chaos of the formation type, that they are being abused by chaos instead of diving into chaos to actually create. And again, that's where the half truth lies in that whole thing. But just knowing that can give you an indicator about the emotional literacy levels of the people that you are particularly working with. So this brings us to harmonic leadership. The three parts of it, obviously purify self, unify team, and then amplify your effect. What I've found over my time, not only in the military, I was heavily involved in a lot of stuff before the military and leadership at school, etc. I've always found myself in positions of leadership, and then getting out of the military and having to find myself and then lead myself out of that place. But then, running charities and doing a lot of other work, rites of passage, and finding myself in varying life situations, including expeditions into jungles, etc. Like, I started to realize that leadership it's been over complicated in many respects, but at the same time, it's this misunderstood component, which it starts with myself. And if I don't come at my day from a pure place, and I start in an egoic place, then the day will have that flavor. But if I can purify my day, then all of a sudden the people that will come to me to become my team, will unify, not together because of a common energy as opposed to a fiction, or a wound. And if I'm attracting people because of a wound, and then, oh my goodness gracious me, it's going to be very hard work to actually make that team be any more effective than, getting the day-to-day stuff done. And that might even be hard. And then coming to amplify, it's like understanding then, well, why am I amplifying this? What is the point of the amplification? And in the amplification, what will actually happen? How do I do it? And what can I be consciously amplifying? And that's a really critical thing. And we'll do a lot of that in module 4 when I'll be asking about that. So just to break them down a little bit more detail, the underpinning concepts for the philosophy, though, that stands on a sixfold. To need a deeper understanding of the mind, I'll actually send out a little video about this. It's just about a 15-minute one. Gives you the bigger understanding of the conscious and subconscious guys might be aware of already. But it will and the reality cycle about how the mind actually works. When we start understanding how the mind works, we can make it work with us instead of against us, which is what often the subconscious has. The thing about psychoanalysis, if you've ever read a bloke called Julius Evola, he takes apart psychoanalysis, Freudian. He has a lot more time for Jung, but he doesn't have a huge, like, he doesn't put Jung on a pedestal like a lot of people do, which I think is a good thing. Putting anyone on a pedestal has barbs on it. But one of the things that he'll tell you about psychoanalysis is it remains in the realm of the sub or unconscious. And if you do that, then you are all, and psychoanalysis is based on a critical examination of people in trauma and wounding. Now, when you do that, you're simply trying to get them out of the trauma. But the thing is that it's so focused on the trauma, our society has become trauma bonded. And we are so focused on trauma now that it's become hero worship. And I'll take you through this concept later about going beyond resilience. And to get an understanding, this is really, really quite critical. So psychoanalysis, simply maintaining its fixation on the sub and unconscious, just takes you down, doesn't take you up. So therefore, where's the balance? And that's what transcendent psychology was attempting to do in some way, shape, or form, to bring a bit more of a balance towards it. So, but understanding the mind and how it works and how it integrates things is really quite pivotal. The collective consciousness, which is a thing that that Jung brought to our minds a little bit more with the understanding of archetypes, like talk about in a minute. But this understanding that there is because of our mind's interaction with other minds, a thing called the collective. And I'll talk to you a bit more in detail about that next session. Beliefs and paradigms, again, I'll talk in next session. Masculine and feminine energies are really quite useful to understand, because then you start to understand what energy is required in a certain situation, the reason why someone leads the way they do, if there's balance or imbalance, why a person grates you, how you're actually really like attracted to leadership style, etc. You start to really have a deeper understanding of all that because of the masculine and feminine. And then when you start going to your dark masculine, dark feminine, and we can go there if you guys wish. Both of you would really get a lot out of going there. It's you actually understand where some really deep power is. Emotional literacy I've talked about in the 7 Hermetic laws. I actually sent you out that video about the introduction to Hermeticism, where I talk about the 7 Hermetic laws. I'll be talking about those laws constantly. I'll keep coming back. You've heard me mention already the law of cause and effect, and I've referred in part to the law of polarity, and law of polarity is a massive one that we'll be talking about in the next couple of days too. So purifying self, what does it mean? Well, the first step is to understand the healing process. If you're interested, I can find a video on the healing process. Oops. Hopefully I haven't deleted it. And I talk actually in detail about healing. If you're interested in that, let me know, and I can tell you, I can send that to you later. But the first thing about healing is you've got to identify that there's something to be healed, and then comes the ownership, because no one can heal you except yourself. And that's a really, really key thing. And go back to paradigm and belief. If you believe you heal everyone, your relationship to the person, your talents and life particularly, will turn out a certain way. When you realize that the person does the inner healing, and that's something even deeper than that, then again, you'll look at life very, very differently. An understanding of how everything works can give the person then the ability to self-remedy, self-rectify, and not even get to the point where they need to heal per se, because they've actually been able to integrate the lesson quicker. The healing is then like has a deep level of forgiveness involved in it as well. Forgiveness of self predominantly, and then the energy is allowed to go back to where it needs to go, and it reforms. And I use that word reform because it comes back together, but not necessarily, and it won't be in the same way that it was previous, and it can't be. So it will reform, and then from that reforming, you'll be able to transcend, come out of the wound, see it for what it is, and then integrate predominantly the lesson into this new architecture that you have. You have to go above the wound to be able to see it and have the lesson. And we know that because of 2020 hindsight, we say it, and lots of other things. So that's a really key part to it as well. I'll take you through that in lots of different ways, shapes, and forms over the next 4 months. Understanding these key concepts like the survival triangle we'll go into when we talk about affluence, but the survival triangle basically says if you've got an issue with money and you can't see it, change topic to either food or time, because they're the 3 elements in the Western psychology which are all about survival. And so it can give you an understanding of your patterns in one will show up in the patterns in another. Then we have competition. There's a difference between competing with and competing against. And I'm not cooperation is awesome and it's epic, but there is a place for competition with. What it does do is draws out its complete aim is actually a form of cooperation anyway, but its complete aim is to allow oneself to master the talent because of the interaction and relationship with another. Oops. Success and failure. We'll go deeply into that. I think it's on Sunday, no, Saturday. Better not be Sunday because we're not together on Sunday. You need a break. But I think it's on Sunday or latter part of tomorrow. Either or, we'll be going deep into success and failure. Having a look at an attachment identity. We'll actually be talking about that tomorrow. Responsibility is one of the banes of the modern leader. And again, we'll be talking about it over the next few days. Again, principles and values we'll talk about. Powerlessness will be a theme that will underpin a lot of our work so that we understand it. And our level of emotional intimacy is the way you'll actually allow yourself to move through any form of powerlessness. When one understands that construct, one comes to this place of allowing ourselves to become quite purified in its sense. Unifying our team, we'll look at a number of 4 core aspects: the narrative, creating the void, the vision, and the empowerment. It's really important that a team has a narrative, a story. The story is the thing that brings the past into the present moment to allow the future to be created, and the vision is the thing which allows our future to be focused upon. But the void is a really key aspect that allows for movement within the universe. And when you understand voids, and science has actually taken a massive step forward in the quantum realm of understanding the playing of voids, and especially in plasmatic science. And the key aspect to life is the void. And empowerment, and that's not just empowerment of other people, but it's empowerment of oneself to be able to therefore be in an empowered environment. Because if we're not empowered, how can we expect our team to be? With this, there's a number of other things that we'll get into: delegation, the ability to do it; communication, I've mentioned already; causal issue identification, resolution; the art of the question. In my humble opinion, the leader's #1 skill set, #1 tool is the question. When we understand that and we come from that place, jeepers creepers, life turns around. Life turns around. Just really quickly on that, like Kirsten and I are going through a massive relationship upgrade at the moment. And one of the things I realized after 15 years of being a facilitator, mentor, and all that other stuff is I'd turned my relationship into listening from a place where, from a facilitator's eyes, so often when we're talking about what was going on for ourselves, because we tune in how we're feeling and stuff like that, instead of simply being a friend and a lover. And I realized it was coming back at me as well. And I've said to Kirst, just 2 days ago, I was having a couple with her. I said, my new partner, this is how I speak at the moment, my new partner and I, we communicate very differently. No one has to fix anything of the other one, and I can just sit there and listen. And my questions are now going to be go back to the way they were, framed towards developing a desire of loving understanding. And I realized that, I had to see how much I'd dropped that in my own relationship. It was really quite fundamental. Trust. I love this one. We're going to spend a lot of time on this one. And its counterpart. And I'm not going to go into that right now because we'll do that a lot tomorrow. But principles and values is where we'll actually do a lot of that work into understanding what trust is. So they're 6 really key fundamental things within the team environment, but the pillars themselves with those 4 are supported by those other 6 counterparts. Amplifying effect, this is like, again, a whole module towards the end about this. Why am I desiring to amplify something? What effect am I actually going to do it, and how's it going to happen, etc., etc. So it's really quite key to understand. The intention is really, really fundamental, and then attention is another aspect in which, if I don't get right, it doesn't allow me to do it, because focus allows for the amplification of my attention, which has been infused with my intention. And when I realize that we're interconnected, that's when I start to realize, and especially it dissolves this level of responsibility upon my shoulders of the external and brings it back to the internal, because I then start to realize I'm not on my own and I'm not doing this on my own. And that, therefore, purity of action, if my action is come up in a minute, but if it's laced with ego, then I'm going to be in trouble. Resonance is a really key factor to understand, and the science of resonance, how to utilize it. And we'll talk quite a bit of detail about change, how change occurs, some basics of it, and how to bring your attention towards creating resonance, which therefore allows for the pure amplification. Releasing ego it's directly linked to the purifying of action, and then the co-creator. If I haven't released my ego, I'm going to really struggle being a co-creator, because I will believe I'm the creator, and that's when you become ego maniacal. So lots of interesting things happen in that space, I suppose, as can be seen again, in the world space at the moment. So they're the three predominant aspects. As you can see, like I can say harmonic leadership is really simple. It has three components: purify self, unify team, amplify effect. In those, though, there's a lot of depth to them, and we'll go into a lot of depth. And you'll also see that purifying self is a constant. It's not one after the next, although I have gone one, two, three. But it's where I start my focus first. Because if I don't purify myself, then the team that I draw to me will be very much from that impure place. And I witnessed this a lot when I was going through issues myself of money and everything. All the people that I was drawing to me were people with money issues. Of course they were, because that's the energy that I was putting out inside myself. So it was really quite fascinating. But to get anything done, like to take projects and to take them to the next, well, the thing is the team was created in lack. So good luck getting anything done in lack. And then I pull my hair out. Well, why can't it be done? Because of where it started. And so the work on the foundational fundamentals is so pivotal, so key. And if we don't get that right, well, can't say that to say if we don't get it right, it won't work. It's not true. Like what I've completely understood, and this is a constant theme of this course, is when we understand there is no right and wrong, everything has a deeper meaning. It's not that I'll then let go of any passion to move forward. Actually, it's the complete opposite. Like the passion then becomes unbridled because I start to just let go of the energy that I've put in self-judgment, and I can refocus that and bring that through my attention to working on the things that I'm actually working to improve. Um, and someone said the other day, it was really quite funny. They used the example of Elon Musk versus Boeing and the rockets. And why was Musk able to put one of the rockets into space? Well, because he put 6 rockets up that blew up before he got to the 7th one. Whereas Boeing, in that entire time, didn't launch one because they were going for perfection. And when they finally launched it, it blew up anyway. So you can like people bag Musk out, and am I saying is a saint? No, I would definitely not say that. Go back to the point about father issues. Read his book, but the point there is like I can learn off anyone when I'm actually looking from a neutral perspective, a perspective of wonder and awe. I can learn off anyone because then I don't judge them. What I do is receive the information and I internally transpose it to say, how is this of beneficial reflection to myself? And then I can go, okay, cool. And that's what I reflect is go back to the point that I started 4 businesses that collapsed upon themselves. But the point is now I'm here and I'm actually going through a collapse of this at the moment. Like this is morphing into something else. And that's for me, I get excited now. I don't get sad, upset, or whatever. Sometimes things like I feel sadness about something because I will know that's about loss. And so what I'll do is I'll stop, I'll go pause, I'll go, okay, I'll feel that, and I'll get any message which is coming to me about that. And then it will go very quickly into gratitude. It'll move from sadness into gratitude because gratitude then sets the tone for the new creation. It's really quite important. I want to just finish this session by gifting you this bit of information. And as a leader, any team I build is on this. So in all the community work that I did, if you wanted to join the community, you'd sign the Memorandum of Community Understanding. And this trilogy of 3 was the basis of the memorandum. It was so funny watching people of all different walks of life kick back and say, I'm not signing it. And I've gone, okay. Do you want me to explain it? Okay. So I'd explain it and I said, where do I sign? And it's like really, really fascinating. And because of what it calls a person to, it's not me calling the person to do anything. It's actually Trilogy of Three calls the person to do it themselves. So the first part is that I control three things in life: my thoughts, my words, my deeds. No one else controls them. I control them. And realistically, if you look at it, they're the only things you do control. But the question to us is, have we mastered this? Like, have I mastered my thoughts? Go back to what your point was before, Lisa. You know, my words, are my words always impeccable? Great book to read on that is Dog Miguel Ruiz's Four Agreements. The first agreement out of that is to be impeccable to one's word. You can also get that on YouTube. It's about a 23-minute video of someone reading it too. Actually, all the chapters, I think he does the same. So you can get those on YouTube if you want. But it's about, you know, making sure my word is purified, sanctified. And my deeds, then, if I don't understand where my behavior is, have a look at the words that I'm using. And if I don't understand my thoughts, have a look again at my words I'm using or my behavior that I'm actually doing. And when I use both or the other two to actually reflect on the specific one, then I can actually purify them. My actions must be done in respect, reverence, and responsibility. I must take personal responsibility for my actions, but I must take responsibility for my actions, not another's actions. The actions that I do take, though, they must be done with sanctity, with reverence. It must bring the sacredness back. It must actually be done in sacrifice. And if you don't like that word, and I didn't for a long time, go to the etymology of the word sacrifice. It means to bring the sacred back, to bring the sacred fire back into my life. I think it's actually a really beautiful word now. And to have the reverence of life. So therefore, if I don't understand the sacredness of my body and who I am and what I've been gifted, then I will go and get a shin extension. Still turns me off dramatically, by the way, when I think about it. But all my relationships, every relationship must have reverence. And if it doesn't, why would I be involved in that relationship? And when I live by that, you watch how many relationships I turn off and how many I turn on, and what ones need more energy into them, because right now I'm not actually being sacred in that relationship. And respect is a pillar. But I must also understand that if I'm not respecting someone, the person I'm truly not respecting is myself. And not only that, no one can ever disrespect me unless I choose. And when I understand that, real power comes to me. The outcome must always be a win for you, a win for me, and a win for the divine. I say the divine, it could be the group, the higher. It will always be transcendent. It will be bigger than me. And I say the divine, great spirit, God, whatever one wishes to label it, it doesn't really matter. And they don't really care either, as long as there's reverence and respect that it enhances the relationship. I used to bag the shit out of Christ for everything that happened in my life, and then I realized, oh, hold on, that's happened to him for 2,000 years, so probably one bloke, you know, he doesn't necessarily mind too much. But it did like get me I did an anger session on Christ and God. It was really, really good, and it was actually recommended to me by an 80-year-old Catholic nun who was a very small lady, absolutely one of the most divinely beautiful people, and at times so non-church like. Um, and she said, James, have you got angry at God yet? I said, no, I haven't, Sister Carolyn. She says, you need to get angry at God. I said, thank you. I've got your permission now. So, yeah, there's beauty in any relationship and there's an underlying theme in whichever way in this course. I really strongly recommend and encourage you to strengthen your connection to whatever it is of your connection to the divine in your language. And I'll speak of varying traditions, methodologies, philosophies of connection, simply to give you an understanding of where other people come from, which I trust will enrich yours. That, I believe, is enough. Are there any questions on that data dump about harmonic leadership or anything that I've covered so far, or about the course?
No.
No?
I will say I am similar to you as far as note taking, and I've already taken 2 pages of notes.
Yeah.
But I love it too, though. Obviously, we're going to have the recording, and I've just kind of like, yeah. Yeah, anyway, I just thought that was pretty funny.
Awesome.
I was just wondering, it's very simple, it's powerful, it's deep. Has it been trialed and tested like long term? Like, have you got like some testimonies? Doesn't matter now, I'm in and I believe in it, but what's
Of Harmonic Leadership or of the Trilogy of Three, or what specifically?
the harmonic leadership? Like, is there some examples of success stories from the application of it?
Yeah, totally. And I'll take you through them when they're relevant. But yeah, when I'm doing corporate work now or organizational work, it's all premised in this. I've actually been teaching this, and people have been implementing it. Like Nudgee College first 15, they are, aren't they? Rugby's 15. Aussie rules is 18. First 15 actually took the principles and wrote them on their change room wall. And when I went back for the third time, the third year, the coach turned around and said, "Right, Cheese has been coming or he's come twice. Came 3 years ago, and we won the premiership. Came a year after that, we won the premiership. He didn't come last year, we didn't win. So listen to everything the guy says, would you?" And I thought I didn't actually realize that, but that was really quite cool. But yeah, you'll actually notice that can I say harmonic leadership is new? No. It's a way of looking at a lot of stuff we've forgotten and putting it in a way in which simplifies it, makes sense, and brings back the practical application of a lot of things which possibly we overcomplicated. Be it. Good question. I like that question. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, we're back on at 12 New South Wales. So, and like I say, there's questions. We'll start off with questions there too, and we'll go into that. But the next session will be about taking a number of the key fundamentals, the key concepts, and we'll go deeper into them as well to give you a bit of an understanding about, how it all works. So until then, big love.
Thanks,
Thank
Shane.
you. Mhm.